Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, Dawn Spectre here. Today with another IEM review, and you can already see we are looking at a good boy today. We are looking at the Kiwi Ears Cadenza. Cadenza? I don't know how to pronounce that correctly. But yes, after my last two reviews unfortunately turned really negative, I can already give you a small spoiler. Today it will be exactly the opposite. We are looking at one of the most hyped sets below 50 euros or $50. And yeah, we will take a look at this one, if there's a reason for that, or what it can, what it can't do. As usual, quick packaging accessories. And you can already see I have it partly unboxed because this thing is a pain in the ass to remove. You have to shake it and shake it and shake it more and actually to get it out. So I already did that before the video, so you don't have to see me shaking it for like 2 minutes straight. So yeah, that's packaging. It tells you how it's named, it tells you the color. And when you open the box here, which is actually relatively nicely made, like matte black, feels thick, so will be protective. When you get here maintenance guidelines, and here would be by IEM inside. We take a quick look at accessories, and they have a good news already start. Look at these. We have 3 different pair of different set of tips, which all come in S, M, and L, and they all have 3 different outlet diameters. So you will be pretty much able to find a tip that works for you, at least judging from my experience. And actually, the S tips that come provided here are also relatively small. It's not so easy to see on camera, but yeah, they are relatively small. And let's compare these two. You can also see we have slightly different profiles. So pretty sure you will find a tip that works for you in this yeah, accessory set that you get here. No foam, but below 50, that is acceptable, I would say. I would prefer maybe one set of silicone less and one pair of foam or so. But other than that, the accessories really good at this price point, and packaging as well. Then next, let's take a quick look at the IEM build before we come to the cable. And here I have the red version, as you can see. And as you can clearly see, this is an one-piece design, standard resin affair, which at this price point is pretty awesome. Usually you get something like KZ or something like that, where they have 2 plastic shells glued together. Does feel okay, but not so great. A bit of flimsy at the maximum. But this one here feels very solid. It is solid resin, as you can see, and as you can also feel. It's smooth, it's shiny, and you leave fingerprints on it, so that might be a problem for you. But overall, at this price point, this is an awesome build quality. I have literally 0 complaints with it. There's also the 2-pin connector is flush, well integrated. And the nozzle here uses a standard metal grill, unlike the thin flimsy meshes that KZ sometimes uses. So really, I have no complaints in terms of build quality here. This is really well done, and yeah, nothing else what I can say. 2-pin connector is fine, pressure hole here and here. So the placement of this pressure hole here might be a bit not controversial. Let me just turn the light on so you can see it better. Here you can see it. So maybe you could get a bit dirt on that because it's not the smallest, but really I have no complaints about build quality here. It's a bit minimalistic in terms of design, but well, I prefer that over something weird. And then next, after the IEM build at this price point is really good because pure resin shell below 50 is a bit hard to find. Let's take a look at the cable, and that's the first time I managed to get a small knot in the cable. So after using it for a couple of weeks now, I can tell you this cable at this price point is also awesome. If you take a look at other cheaper IEMs like the KZ stuff again, to come back to that, their cable is so flimsy, it's so tangly, it is really not good. And then Kiwi Ears comes along for less than what the PR2 would cost, and the cable is just smooth. You can see that, it doesn't tangle up weird, it just stays flat. You put it down and it just stays. Also, it doesn't feel flimsy because it has a functioning strain release. Ladies and gentlemen, functioning strain release. That's a neat feature to have today. And yeah, after that, the cable is not too thin. It is, I think, 4 cores that are just, yeah, like kind of drilled together, not drilled together, like rotated together. Is totally fine. I have no complaints with this build here. And then the splitter actually matches color-wise the connector, and both are metal shelling here, or metal shell. And then you come on top, and if I see this correctly, the diameter of the cable actually is the same on top which it is below. So that also works pretty well, and yeah, doesn't come as too thin or too flimsy. And then we have the chin slider, which actually is also working totally well. That is really something that I rarely see even at IEM, so it costs way more. Chin slider usually doesn't work so well. Here, it stays in place without sliding down. It doesn't stay too solid on here or too hard on it, so you can really just push it, like, or pull it without too many force. And it just does the job totally fine. So again, zero complaints here. Going to the ear hook, you can see this is a bit more than 180 degrees bend here. So that might not work for everyone, but worked fine for me and also for my ear. The relatively, I want to say, like smallish bending radius that you can see here worked fine. I didn't have any problems with that, but just keep in mind, if your ear is a bit bigger, this could create pressure hotspots at the end, at the back here, if that presses down on your ear, especially because this is kind of this twisted cable, right? So that has a bit of uneven texture. But the rubberization is not too thick, so it did work totally fine for me, had no problems. And then you get the actual 2-pin connector for flush things, as you can see, which has the same style as the splitter. And I think the main controversial point here is you can see L and R's printed on and does have no color coding. So there's a tiny bit of optimization potential here. But all in all, cable is really good. I really had no problems with it. It's even at like 60, 70, it would be totally fine. I would have no complaints. So yeah, that's about it. Then next, let's quickly talk about comfort and fit. Again, I will throw on measurements of how big this IEM actually is, so you can see yourself. And yeah, this is not a mega small IEM, but it's also not big. I measured it is like 2 centimeters high, 1.5 centimeters wide, and about 1.4 centimeters deep. So that means it's not so small, but it's also not big, and it should fit most peanuts just fine. However, the biggest issue that you will most likely have with the Cadenza in terms of comfort and fit, before I show you, before we go back to measurements, let's take a quick look at the video here. You can already see that's a thick nozzle. Like, again, this is one of those things that you don't want to have on your IEMs. Like, everything above 6 millimeters is too wide, and this one goes as far to 6.5 millimeters at the outlet here is just too much. Me with a small ear canal, I kind of have difficulties finding the right tip for it, and overall I did prefer a SpinFit CP360, but they're also a bit difficult to get on. And I have to be honest, I accidentally destroyed another pair of SpinFit on this IEM just because the lip here is so wide and the corner at the bottom is also not the smoothest. So yeah, actually this IEM managed to destroy another pair of SpinFit for me. It's also partly fault of SpinFit because they're a bit flimsy, but yeah. So keep that in mind. The nozzle outlet is really thick with 6.5 millimeters, and however, to give it a bit of credit here, it doesn't go all the way down with 6.5 millimeters. It's just the lip, which is about, I think, like 1 or 1.5 millimeters long, and after that it directly shrinks down in terms of diameter to 5.3 millimeters. So overall, it's still much more comfortable than, for instance, the variations, just because, yeah, the nozzle here is not all the way the same thickness. So yeah, also comfort-wise, because it has 2 pressure holes, we can show here in the video, one here and one here. There's no driver flags, I had no problems with that, so also that worked totally fine for me. One small issue you could maybe have is the nozzle length. The nozzle itself is not long, it's about 3 millimeters or so, but because the actual shell, let me quickly show you in video, does also extrude a bit in the ear. For shorter peanuts, like if your peanut is a bit like more flat, this could already reach too far into your canal and poke a bit in the S. So because the external canal will usually have an S bend, and this could poke a bit there, but was no problem for me. And overall, I did prefer shorter tips like SpinFit CP360 or even the Moondrop spring tips. They work best for me here. But yeah, if your E-canal is a bit deeper, I think you will be fine with most tips. Okay, next let's talk about isolation, and to make it short, I couldn't find official values, but they would also not be great. It's really not a great isolating IEM. I would say it's below average, like not a lot, but quite a bit below average in terms of passive isolation. And that means if you're on public transport or so, you certainly want to take foam tips on the go, just because even with foam tips, you can just get it to average isolating. Everything else is not possible. So I cannot recommend the Cadenza without foam for everyday or public transportation. That's just isn't isolating well enough here. But with foam would be fine. It's just average. It's not good. It's not bad. It's average isolation. Then we come to drivability, and official spec-wise, it has 32 ohms at 110 decibel. Yeah, that means on paper, for dynamic driver IEM, it's totally normal. It doesn't have more resistance or less. It's totally fine here. And in my experience, it also can be driven by basically anything. Plug in my laptop, worked fine. My computer worked fine. Random USB-C dongle worked fine. Apple dongle worked fine. More powerful dongle worked tiny bit better. My Shanling Up5 or my BTR5, something like this, work totally fine. So you don't have to worry about terms of drivability. Maybe if you add the cleanness a bit, like the Up5 does, or the other dongles that are a bit better, maybe you get a bit better capabilities here, like a tiny bit more tight base, a bit better imaging or something like that. But it's really not worth upgrading for this. Just use the Apple dongle or anything else, it will be okay. In terms of percentages, I had given it like 90 to 85% of what this IEM is capable of. You get with the cheapest dongle. Add the cleanness, so like the Apple dongle or something else a bit more powerful, then you get everything that this thing can, and you don't need to worry about it. Then let's come to the core. We talk about sound. And I have thrown a graph for you. It's again taken with the IEC 711 coupler, so you can compare it with most other graphs that have been taken with the same coupler. And what should I say? It's in V-shaped IEM. Like, it really is not in clean V-shape or like in U-shape. It's definitely V-shaped, but it does it in a tasteful way. It doesn't look too bright on the graph, and it also doesn't sound too bright to the ear. However, again, it is definitively V-shaped, so if you don't like that, it will definitely not be for you. That was a general characteristics, yes. And then we start with treble, and judging by graph, it goes past 10K to like 12 or 13, and to my ear it also reaches like 12K or something like that before it's dropping. That means you definitely do get a bit of sparkle on top, you get a bit of shimmer, you get a bit of upper-treble details. That just makes trailing ends a bit better pronounced than IEMs that would already drop off at like 8 or 9K have. So this makes it feel like it actually has detail, which at this price point is not something that you see very often. Going with further down from here at like 9 to 9.5K, there's a peak similar to what most planar sets have at the moment. And unfortunately, I can tell you this peak is real, like that is not a measuring artifact at like 9 to 9.5K that exists. And if your PINA is just a bit weird or ear canal is weird, unfortunately this peak can be shifted in like the 8K region, and that will make it sibilant. For me, that was not an issue. I did not have sibilance with the Cadenza. I just want to say, if your ear canal is a bit like weird shaped, this can be pushed to 8K and it will be unpleasant. But what this 9K peak does, or this 9.5K, something like that, it does add a nice sizzle and splash to drums, or gives the e-guitars a good bite, and makes them well defined, and something like Metallica, Iron Maiden, Linkin Park, or even some fusion jazz or normal jazz, like the Black Sad soundtrack, were totally fine here, and I had zero problems with it. However, again, I want to mention that this is definitively in the treble V-shape, so it is a bit more bright, like maybe 4 decibels or so, 3-4 decibels more than what would be like neutral-ish. So if you compare it, and I know it's a completely different price class, but let's just throw in Heyday for a quick comparison. You can see this is definitively brighter than Heyday, and that means I can't listen to this on high volume. It's just, it gets a bit too much for me. It's a bit too treble forward, and was not my preferred choice for higher volume listening. But again, it was totally fine, and I think most people won't have any issue with the way the treble is articulated here. Similar story with Lower-Treble. It's very normal pronounced. It's not too much. I didn't have no problems with it. Same as for upper mids here, just worked fine. Like, can't tell you anything negative about it. Just worked, and at this price point, I would even go as far to say it's in well pronounced lower mids and upper mids, and lower treble without any issues. Unfortunately, I think the biggest downside that you have with Cadenza, because it's in reshaped IEM, as you can clearly see on the graph, yeah, the mids are not the cleanest. So they have additional warmth in the lower registers here. That means they come off as more full in quotes, and that can be pleasant if you have male vocals that are a bit lower pitched. They just come off as a bit more nicely. And yeah, bass guitars will have a bit of additional pizzazz, making just a bit more fun. But it also costs the cleanness of the mids. It hurts the separation a bit. And if you compare it to something like the Kahn, which is in similar price point, yeah, you can definitely hear this is not the cleanest mids that you can get. And does hurt, I think, mid resolution a tiny bit as well. But in general, at this price point, it's not really a point to complain about, because it's in reshaped IEM and the driver is still good enough. So again, to come back to my metal examples, the vocals from Iron Maiden, Metallica, Linkin Park, or even Warrior Path work totally fine. And even something like fusion jazzy, like Takanaka, worked also without any issue here. And yeah, especially considering this price, I wouldn't have anything to complain. Yeah. And then last but not least, when we talk about frequency response, bass. Yep, that's a beryllium coated DD, and you can hear it. Especially compared to Kahn, which has just a random DD, I think they call it liquid crystal polymer. But this one is definitely a better DD to my ear, and it has more punch, it has more, not weight, because the bass shelf is not so localized, or like not as good, quotes good, as it would be on Kahn. But it comes off as more punchy, as faster, as a bit more transparent. And it's not the right word for bass, I know. But yeah, bass definitely come off as better here. And yeah, the additional warmth also in the lower mids means you get more like fullness in the upper bass, which can be desirable for some. I'm not a greatest fan of that, but I also didn't have anything to complain here, just because the driver was capable enough and yeah, it worked for my library. I don't want to count more examples that I already have mentioned, so I just want to say the bass in Interstellar worked fine, Nier Automata worked fine, Cyberpunk 77 soundtrack worked totally fine, and yeah, punch was good, so nothing to complain here that much. Sub bass is well pronounced according to graph, and it has rumble and weight. I just want to say again, because it's not so well localized as it would be on the Kahn, it just comes off as not so like, you could say like deep. It's not so deep and meaty. That definitely something that the Kahn has better than the Cadenza. But generally, I had no problems in terms of sub bass here, and it managed an average 2.15 in my benchmark soundtrack from Interstellar soundtrack, and then the track Mountains. So also no problems here, just overall very finely made bass, especially at the price point. Then Soundstage laying with imaging as technicalities here. And yeah, what should I say? The soundtrack actually is rather good, so you can actually distinguish like a bit more space in here, like definitely better than other IEMs that I have heard, especially this price point. And adding to this is also that the imaging is well pronounced. I was surprised when I put this in my ear and I just gamed. It can display like front left, front right, a bit back left and back right. So you can easily game with these, and I really had no issue playing, for instance, Hunt Showdown or Insurgency, and even something more arcadey like the last Battlefield, which was on sale for like 10 euros or so I grabbed it. But yeah, like all of them work fine, and yeah, it's a good IEM for gaming in my experience. Layering though, again, has the same free blob problem, so you have one layer here outside, and one in the middle. So don't expect the best layering. But again, at this price point, I also don't expect more, so that's totally fine there as well. And then, last but not least, before verdict, let's talk about separation, dynamic, and coherence. And I will be again comparing it to the Kahn, just because that is not almost the same price point, but it's very close, and it also uses dynamic drivers. And yeah, in terms of separation, absolutely loses to Kahn. The better tuning, or better tuning of Kahn, and most likely also different drivers helps the separation, and the Kahn just comes off as the better separating IEM like over the whole spectrum. Just that's it, like can't say anything more positive here. But even for this price point, I would also not complain about separation here. It's just not great, but also not bad. So again, it just strikes a nice balance of price performance in terms of separation. Dynamics, I think, are pretty good. Like, had no problems. I think they are most likely better than Kahn even. So yeah, there's no problem there at all. And Coherence is, I would say, it has a bit of a light metallic shimmer as well. It's not much, and compared to Khan, which I somehow think sounds plasticky, definitively didn't come off like that. It was definitively, I think, the better timbre IEMs in terms of those two. And I would take this definitively all day of the week in terms of, coherence and timbre. They're single dynamic, best coherence that you can get. And even for the Khan uses two basically identical DDs, I still think this is the better coherent and better timbred one. So yes. And that's pretty much it. Like, as you can see, like, there's not much criticism here. Like, this is a really good IEM, especially at this price point. Like, at sub 50, the Cadenza is basically a bargain. Like, it comes with 3 sets of tips. It has a good cable, it has a good build quality. The fit and comfort is fine. And it also sounds good. Is V-shaped? Yes, but it's good V-shaped, tastefully made. So really, I can only highly recommend the Cadenza. It's one of the best price performance IEMs I have heard in a long time, and it gets the Don Spector highly recommended stamp. Hope you enjoyed it. If you have questions, if you have criticisms, if you have recommendations, please leave and comment. And with the Don Spector